Joel Osteen. God wants us to prosper financially, to have plenty of money, to fulfill the destiny he has laid out for us. Well, that's weird because Jesus told the wealthy man, sell your possessions and give them to the poor, and you will have treasures in heaven. And then follow me. That's Matthew 19:21, by the way. And Jesus also said, do not store up yourself treasures on earth, but store up treasures in heaven. That's from Matthew chapter 6, verses 19 through 21. So it seems like Jesus warns people of the dangers of greed when he says life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. I wonder if Joel has actually read what Jesus has had to say about really anything. But if you subscribe to this prosperity gospel, give us a call because the show is starting right now. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Truth Wanted. I am your host today, Objectively Dan, and this is the live call-in show that happens every single week, Fridays at 7 p.m. Central Time, where we talk to people about what they believe and why. And if you'd like to call us, you can do that. We have some open lines right now. The number is 512-991-9242, or you can call through your computer at tiny.cc/call TW. Just a quick reminder, Truth Wanted is a product of the Atheist Community of Austin, a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to the promotion of atheism, critical thinking, secular humanism, and the separation of religion and government. And I'd also like to thank and welcome all of our new viewers who are watching from Twitter and Twitch. And yeah, I'm still going to keep calling it Twitter. And we want to give his love to all the folks who are viewing on YouTube, of course, as well, every single week. Hey, we always have a special guest. This week is no different. This week, I am joined by Godless Granny. Godless Granny, welcome to Truth Wanted.
Thank you. I really appreciate the invitation. I have wanted to be on this show with you for some time, so thank you for the opportunity.
And I am so glad that you are on with me today, and we're going to talk a little bit about you in just a second. But Godless Granny, every single week, we are asking folks what they want, and specifically if they want the truth. This is the We Want the Truth segment, and we read out the top 3 comments from our prompt/question. Last week's prompt/question was write a horoscope that applies to everyone. And Prophet Azad was on with me last week, and I gotta tell you, he knocked that out of the park. So let's see if our comment section can compare. We have our number 3 comment, who comes from Nocturnal Lux, who says, everyone's horoscope, you will be born, things will happen in your life, and you will eventually die, which that's pretty good. Pretty good, right? Succinct, kind of covers all the bases. I don't know. Can't go wrong with that one. I like it. Our number 2 comes from Fiction Comment, who says, horoscope, you will overreact to a mild inconvenience and then underreact to a real problem. It ain't that the truth?
Yep.
Ain't that the truth?
Absolutely.
Right?
Yep.
All day, every day. That's me for sure. But our number 1 comment this week comes from Know What, who says, horoscope that is 100% real. Virgos are screwed this month. Better luck next month. It's like, awesome. I love that. Which is like 1/12 of the planet is screwed this month, I guess. I think there's 12, right, of those signs, or 13. I don't know, because they like changed the system and stuff. There's lore behind all that. But anyway, that's our comments this week. Thank you guys for answering our prompt. This week's prompt is going to be, we know crystals can't heal, but their little known actual power is blank. So I think this is a really good prompt. I'm excited to see people's answers to this one. But Godless Granny, what are the little known powers of crystals? You got any ideas?
Yes. The little known power of crystals is making money disappear.
Ooh.
And the more you buy, the more money it makes disappear.
Damn, wow. That's a logarithmic function, right? That's a linear function right there. That's interesting. Yeah, I agree with that. I was going to say something about, like, it can charge up the moonlight or something to curse people, but your answer is way better, honestly. That's a good one. So yeah, thank you for your answer to that. And folks, leave your comment below and we'll read the top 3 answers next week. Want to know what's a little known power about crystals? So this week I'm joined by yourself, Godless Granny. Godless Granny, you are a YouTube content creator, and you're a granny, and you're a lot of things. So tell us about yourself.
Okay, I have had a YouTube channel for about 4 years now, and I do a weekly live stream show on Saturdays from 3:30 to 4:30 Central Time. I have a variety of guests on that show. Sometimes I have well-known guests, and sometimes I have very little-known guests. I like to have on people who are just starting a YouTube channel and need a little bit of promotion, and also people that are well known that other people want to hear from. I also do a scripted video every week, and the topics that I usually address are religious claims, transgender issues, and women's issues. This last week, though, well, I should say just this morning, I just released a video that is very different from my usual content because it was addressing the Florida Board of Education wanting to teach middle schoolers that there was a benefit to slavery. And so I did more of a video montage of clips that I took from a number of different things and put it together with some music.
Yeah, that's a big topic to talk about on
Mhm.
YouTube for sure. But like what I like about what you're putting out there, and of course, I think you know this because you put this in your username. I mean, I get listen, I get called out because people say I bring up people's ages too much. Okay,
Mm.
but there are not a lot of people I would say within your age demographic that are like streaming on YouTube. Like I don't I mean, besides yourself, I just don't know that that's really a thing. I think that's really interesting. Like, how did you get into making stuff on YouTube?
Well, I actually have not been an atheist for very long. I've only been an atheist for about 6 more months than I've been on YouTube. In fact, it's just coming up on my, I guess, 4th, 5th year since since I've deconverted. And I started watching a lot of atheist content right away to try to understand a lot of things. Well, for one thing, I realized that there were a lot of things that I'd had blinders on. It was keeping myself from learning, particularly in the area of science. And one of the YouTubers that I was watching was Shannon Q, and Shannon Q was saying we do not have enough women atheists on YouTube. And I said, well, I could do that. And
Yeah.
Godless Engineer happens to live in the same city that I do. So I took Godless Engineer and KC out to dinner at a nice steakhouse here in town and asked him, "How do you do this?" And he told me, and my channel was born.
That's awesome. That is so cool. Yeah, Shannon Q is right. There aren't enough women atheists in the space. It's definitely a lot better than it was a few years ago, I'd say. Inarguably so. But it can always still be better. I say this with the full knowledge of knowing that I am a straight cis like white guy that is also hosting a call-in show and stuff. But like I am really glad when we get to hear from perspectives like yourselves on these issues for putting my own blinders to a test, right? Seeing what biases I might have in my own upbringing, and sort of deconstructing some of those paradigms. So yeah, you talk about some heavy stuff on your channel, including the issue of transgender topics. And like I thought your reason for talking about that, or what are your interests, or one of the reasons why you became interested in it was kind of interesting. Can you talk about that experience a little
Sure,
bit?
sure. I have a transgender son. And so all of the issues that you see wanting to block medical care for transgender people, those hit very close to home for me.
Yeah, yeah. Like, so was this idea of transgenderism, right? This or just people being transgender. Well, I feel like when you say transgenderism, it's like you get into some like weird territory there. But people being transgender, right? Like that's something that wasn't within my world, right? Wasn't within my purview. Certainly growing up Christian, in the middle of Central Texas, right? Like it just like wasn't a thing. I didn't know any trans people. That community wasn't visible to me. I only knew stereotypes and stuff I saw on TV. So like, was this like also like this concept of being transgender? Was that something you had to like learn and grow with, or were you always accepting? Like, what was your journey with that?
Okay, the first person that was transgender that I ever heard of was Renee Richards.
Mm,
Renee Richards was playing tennis when I was, I believe, in high school.
mm,
And my parents were very progressive for their day.
mm.
They were both agnostic. but they did not accept Renee Richards. And a big part of the reason was because the way Renee was portrayed in the media, as
Mm,
the only reason that she transitioned was because she wanted to play women's tennis. And so, that was the only person I knew of who was transgender until Caitlyn Jenner. And shortly after I heard of Caitlyn Jenner, my son's best friend in high school was transgender. And I really learned a lot of what I knew at that time from my son's relationship with his friend. And at that time, I did not accept it because I was still a believer. I was still a conservative believer. However, I was on the more liberal end of the believers in that even though I could not accept that a person could be transgender, I could accept my son's friend for who he was.
mm.
This is who you say you are, fine. I don't believe that's true, but if that's who you say you are, then then fine, that's who you are. So there was a bit of a dissonance between what I thought was true and what I was willing to project, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Um,
no, totally.
but then after I became an atheist, I met Jenny Morgan and Polymathic Jen. And those two women really taught me what it means to be transgender. I don't know if you know them, but they are both my age, and Jenny Morgan's actually even a little older than I am, and she's a regular on Purple Rhymes with Oranges show. And Polymathic Jen, they taught me a lot more. So when my son came out as being transgender also, they kind of had paved the way a little. I still was not that good in my reaction to him,
Mm,
but at least I could accept him.
yeah. So do you think like your deconstruction of your faith also played a role in your deconstruction of like what it meant to even have a gender
Yes.
and transgender? Okay.
Yes. Yes. Mhm.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like what do you think is the relationship there?
Um, I think because the big thing is that it made me open to listening to what the scientists had to say.
Mm, mm,
As a believer, I had blinders on to most science. I didn't believe in evolution. I didn't, although it's really funny because if somebody had sat down with me and said, "Well, do you accept DNA?" I would have said, "Yeah." Well,
mm,
DNA proves evolution. I probably would
sure.
have deconverted much sooner if somebody had shown me that.
Mm, mm,
um,
yeah.
and one thing I tell people is that I have a very compartmentalized mind. And I don't always put things together without someone else showing me that, hey, these two things go together. And that's exactly how I ended up deconverting. Was I was watching Aaron Ra. My son had showed me an Aaron Ra video, and Aaron Ra was saying, we know from history that the flood didn't happen. Now, he named a whole bunch of other things, but it was the history one that hit me, because as soon as he said that, I knew he was right. Because
Mm,
suddenly, for the very first time, I put together what I knew of ancient human history with what I knew of the Bible. I had never made the connection that, hey, they don't work together.
yeah,
And
interesting. And actually you answered my next question, which was like what started on that
mm,
path for you for
mhm.
deconstruction. So it sounds like it was really like actually encountering scientific facts about the world that actually like could kind of sort of
Really historic
converge.
facts rather than
Okay.
scientific. Because
Okay.
the science came later, the history came first.
The history. So it was kind of a more progressive understanding of history rather than that. And did you always kind of have an idea of, oh, like the earth is like 6,000 years old? Were you like,
No, I was not a
no?
young earther. I had been a
Mm,
young earther at one time until I went to the Shed Aquarium, because the young earthers made the mistake of making a falsifiable claim to me, which was that fish cannot grow lungs. Then
mm,
I went to the Shed Aquarium and I saw lungfish
yeah,
sitting there right in front of me. And I said, obviously, fish can grow lungs. There they are.
sure, sure. Yeah, 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 that's kind of funny because like, some people that it's like it's always kind of different reasons, I guess. Sometimes it's personal relationships they have with folks in the church that fall apart. Sometimes it's a lack of trust in what the Bible has to say. Sometimes it's just like just reconciling basic historical or even scientific facts,
Mhm.
which is like you think like, oh, this is something I think. Why didn't I think about this sooner? I feel like
Right,
that's what a lot of
exactly,
people say,
exactly.
but
Mhm.
I don't know. I guess if you're never challenged on a lot of these ideas personally, right? I mean, like, what's the two things people don't talk about in polite conversation? Religion and politics, right? You think maybe it's a lack of challenge that maybe it took as long as it did, or what do you think was the catalyst there?
It wasn't so much a lack of challenge as it was the direction of the challenge,
Mm,
because, my dad would challenge me to look at things outside of my faith, but the people inside the faith, the leaders of the faith, would tell us, "No, don't look at this.
mm,
Only read these sources." Bart Ehrman was absolutely off limits. You do not read Bart Ehrman. Um, and that's what I did. I only looked at things that agreed with my faith, and I had what I thought was a good reason for doing so, which was, I know that God is real. I know that the Bible is true. So what point is there in reading anyone who doesn't start from that knowledge?
mm,
They,
mm.
they obviously don't know what they're talking about. So what point is there in even reading it?
Sure, sure. I think that's a pretty common conception of the world, right? It's like, look, we have the truth.
Mhm.
Why do I need to listen to anybody else, right? Like, it's almost
Exactly.
the equivalent of, oh, here's some guy that says we were all created by aliens 100 years ago. Well, I don't even have to look into that because that
E-
just goes against everything I know.
Exactly.
So why do
Exactly.
I need to look at that? And this crazy evolution thing,
Mhm.
right? That's just
Mhm.
silly. Why are we still have monkeys after all, right? So it's like, yeah,
Now that
I
one
can
I never
see.
heard until I was an atheist.
Oh, really? That's
Mhm.
interesting. I definitely heard that from folks around me
Mm.
that grew up. But like that's I think you point to something there, which is just like, yeah, I don't know. There's always a opportunity for folks to change at any point in their life. I talk to people sometimes even on the show who say there's no point in having these kinds of conversations because people are just going to be who they are and are stuck who they are. But you said this happened 5 years ago, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
That's not a long time ago, right?
Let's
Like
say
I
it was
feel
in
like
2019? Yeah, it was 2019. So, no, it was only 4 years
2019.
ago. Yeah,
So
4 years.
4 years ago. So
Mhm.
4 years ago, and, I mean, like, that's such an awesome thing. I think when you read the stories of most people who have their deconstruction journeys, and at least from the research I've seen, it tends to happen in people's teens and in people's 20s. But then we do
Mhm.
have stories like yourself where it happens later on in life. Do you think like there's a difference in your story compared to people who deconstruct earlier on? Like what do you think maybe might be a reason for that?
A reason for why it took me so long?
Well, yeah, well, I guess I kind of already asked that kind of question, I guess. But like why do you think like it happened 4 years ago and not 10 years ago or not 20
Ah,
years ago?
okay,
Is there any
okay.
yeah.
Um, okay, there was one event that really led into it, and
Mm,
it's interesting how someone else even, had to explain to me what I went through, which was I started reflecting on the life of the Apostle Paul. And
mm,
I didn't know it at the time, but what I did was I reasoned my way into the divine hiddenness problem. Um, and it made me realize that there were definite issues with my theology. What I did was I realized that, okay, first of all, I was Calvinist. I believed in
mm,
predestination, that only the predestined are saved. And for the first time in my life, I thought, what about the people who were not predestined?
mm, mm.
Were they predestined to hell? Were they, did God decide they were going to hell even before he made them? What, if God wants everyone to be saved, is he able to tell everyone what they need to know to be saved? I mean,
Okay.
obviously, an all-knowing God knows exactly what everybody needs to hear in order to be saved. So if God wants them to be saved, all he has to do is tell them. So why doesn't he? And
Mm,
you always get the free will argument, but then there's the Apostle Paul. God personally appeared to Paul and told him. So if God can do that for Paul, why can't he do that for anyone else?
Yeah.
And at
I,
that point, yeah, at that point, I kind of became a universalist.
mm. So kind of you didn't break away from Christianity right away. And
Correct.
that's actually something I want to ask you about, which is okay, so it sounds like you had some theological issues with Calvinism.
Mhm.
Obviously I do too, right? I mean like but a lot of people do. But let's say like we had some answers to some of those questions, right? Or maybe let's even say maybe it's not Calvinism, maybe there's another version of Christianity that works and also accounts for things like evolution and world history and things like that. Would you find it easier to believe in the Christian God if some of those questions were answered, or are there other things that would have held you back, or would hold you back
Would I have
rather?
continued to believe if someone could have answered those questions?
Yeah,
Yeah,
like
I
let's
think
say we
I
get a caller
probably.
today. Let's say we
Mhm.
get a caller today who's like, I'm gonna give you all the answers to all of your questions right now. Would that change your confidence in God not being a thing?
Yeah, it definitely would. There's no
Okay.
question that it would. However, I don't think that's possible for one reason, and that is my the entire foundation of my faith was built on the inerrancy of the Bible.
Mm,
And that's why, realizing that the flood didn't happen in an instant collapsed my entire faith because I
mm,
knew that that was the foundation, that, inerrancy, and one error will collapse the whole thing. And since I've become an atheist, I've discovered that that's just the tip of the iceberg.
sure.
There's
Right.
errors all over the Bible, and
Right.
I just I the thing that I'm absolutely flabbergasted over is I know that the pastors that I ask questions of had to have known some of these things, and I can't help but wonder, were they dishonest in trying to hide these things from me? Or were they, obviously they knew that if they told us that, the pastoral letters are forgeries,
Mhm.
that would have collapsed any idea of an inerrancy, and so they're gonna
Yeah.
hide that, and yeah, I just wonder how they even lived with that's the one person I really wish I could go back to and talk to would be the Calvinist minister that I had and ask him how much of this he knew and was hiding.
I wonder that myself too, because I obviously don't have a seminary education, right?
Mhm.
But I would consider myself, especially after doing this show, more knowledgeable than the average person or even average Christian on like Christianity, right? Like I feel like I'm fairly well informed on a lot of theological doctrine, a lot of the debates, a lot of the historical claims, a lot of the prophecy. I mean, all the whole nine yards. And I can't imagine if I knew that so much more than that by actually going to school for this stuff, like how I could really wrap my mind around talking to people about this and like what answers I would come to. That is a mystery to me. I don't know how someone's able to do that. I don't know if it's I assume some of it's a lack of honesty, right? Maybe not being honest to themselves. Maybe it's a denial. But I have to imagine that some of them are still quite sincere in
I
their
do
belief,
believe
right?
they are
There's no
sincere.
way.
I
Yeah,
agree.
there's no way it can't be that everybody is just lying, whether it's to people or to themselves. I think there has to be some sort of sincere belief, and that'd be hard for me. I don't think I could attain that where I'm at
I th
anymore,
I
right?
think what they do is they resolve that there are some things that are mysteries and that only
Mm,
God understands them. But I think they also try to protect their congregations from some of the information that they know would be the more challenging of the mysteries.
mm, yeah. That there's probably some of that rationalization work
Mhm.
going on there, but not to speculate on people's own psychology. If you want to call in and tell us why you believe in God or why you believe in really anything else, this is the show to do it. So we do have some open lines, and we are going to get to some callers in just a second here. I think it's about that time, but before we do that, Godless Granny, we have to thank the patron of the week because every single week we always give a shout out to the folks on Patreon for donating to the show. I, of course, want to thank everybody that donates on the Patreon. You guys rock. But of course, we always want to give a shout out to at least one person every week. So this week's patron of the week is going to be from Roll Freeze, Jerry Dupuy. I think it's Dupuy. Dupuy, I think is that French? I don't know. I'm not very good at that kind of thing. But thank you, Jerry, for donating, and thank you to everybody who donates on Patreon. You guys rock. I would hate, look, I'll be honest. I would hate if I donated and somebody didn't pronounce my name right. So Jerry, I'm sorry if I got your last name wrong, but I honestly gave it my best shot there. Okay. So Jerry, thanks so much. And of course, thank you to everybody who donates. Godless Granny, you ready to talk to some folks?
Absolutely.
Okay, let's do it. I think we're going to start off with a pretty interesting call. I'm curious to see how this goes. This is Nautica, who's calling in from the United States. Nautica, you are live on Truth Wanted. What's up?
Hey, Dan and Godless Granny. How you doing?
Hello, I'm fine.
Good.
How are
How about
you?
yourself? Yeah.
I'm doing pretty good. Yeah, pretty good.
Cool. So what do you want to talk to us about today?
I'd like to talk to you about the scientific method and the idea of why, when questioning God's existence, how come we can't start out with the idea of like, why, God exists, and this is how we might start to go about discovering his existence, rather than God doesn't exist, so we shouldn't even begin to search.
Well, I mean, if we assume something exists, I mean, that kind of defeats the purpose a little bit, right? Because then we're just, I mean, the whole point of the scientific method is to confirm the existence of something or not. Like, if we start with the assumption, then what are we trying to prove? Does that make sense?
I think in
Yeah,
the
that makes
scientific
perfect sense,
method, rather than starting with a conclusion, we start with a question. We
Yeah.
start with the question is, we observe that an apple falls from the tree. Why? And so the scientific method is the discovery of the answer to the question why. It doesn't start with, we know there is gravity or we know there isn't gravity. We start with the question and we work to an answer. We don't start with the answer and try to figure out why the answer is right.
Yeah. I think,
Well,
honestly,
I guess
you'll go ahead. Sorry.
I guess that would lead into another question, and I suppose the way I phrased the question shows my rudimentary understanding of the scientific method, as best as rudimentary as it is. However, I guess that would lead into another question, and the question is this: if we start out with the question, does God exist, which would seem to be a more appropriate question, does God exist? Is there any way that the both of you could come up with that we might test for an invisible God?
It's a great question.
I mean,
It is.
Great
It's a great question.
For philosophy?
Yes, so there's a few problems with this question, and not saying that you're coming with a question that's problematic. What I'm saying is there's absolute difficulties with answering a question like that, right? How do we demonstrate the existence of an invisible, ununderstandable, beyond our comprehension God? Like, where do we even begin with that idea? So the problem is, under a classic, what's called empirical view, which is this idea that all of our knowledge comes from testing the world, from the scientific method, things like that, we really can't. That's kind of a big problem, right? Like, how can we know about something like that? So maybe if we take a step back and we look, okay, so what do we know about the claim of God? Well, then maybe we can get some answers there. And actually, according to most traditions of the Christian God, there are a few claims that we can look at. Godless Granny brought up a great example of this earlier when she talked about there is no evidence, absolutely none, of a global flood that happened 6,000 years ago, right? This is something that the Bible exclusively claims. And we exclusively know that that's not the case. Now, you may say, well, maybe my God isn't one of the Bible. Maybe it's not even the Christian God, and that's fine. If we're saying, oh, God is like the universe, or God is even outside the universe, well, then science can't even do anything with that. Science can only observe what's in the universe and how we interact with it, right? Our senses and everything about us is within the physical confines of the universe. So outside of that, we don't have a shot. So yeah, this is kind of a philosophically difficult problem to solve. But the Christian God in particular does have very specific claims about what he does in the physical world. And those are things that we can examine. And that's where I find major problems with believing in the Christian God, because they really don't match up with our experiences. Here's an example of this: miracles, right? Christians say that they can heal people and they can do all kinds of stuff. There's tons of stories recorded of it in the Bible. Not a single time have we ever been able to conclusively demonstrate that a miracle is the reason why somebody has been cured. We've been able to show, correlations with Tylenol relieving headaches. We've been able to show chemotherapy helping with cancer. We've never been able to show that prayer is an effective method for healing anybody. And people have studied this, right?
There's even a study that has shown that prayer patients that were prayed for did more poorly than patients that were not prayed for.
And that's the Templeton Foundation study that demonstrated that. So not to go into a whole thing there. I guess it's too late for me to apologize because I kind of did. But yeah, there are really interesting philosophical issues when we come to this idea of, okay, how do we measure and test God? It really just depends on what kind of God we're looking at. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, it makes perfect sense. Now, let me interject one point.
Sure.
How, shoot, I forgot the point I wanted to interject. It was a great point, and
that's okay.
It brought it up in my mind as you were speaking.
Maybe while you're thinking about it, if Godless Granny, did you have anything you wanted to add to what I said?
I was just going to kind of refine what you said, is that if we're going to explore the question of does God exist, the first thing we have to do is define what we mean by God. Yeah. And as Dan pointed out, if you're going to refer to the Christian God, then you've got to take your investigation in one direction. But if you're defining God as being a natural force or an impersonal supernatural force, your investigation is going to go in a completely different direction.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
Now, what I wanted to interject is this: what if at some point in time the God or the gods or what have you decided that, because it seems to me, and it's clearly evident that in every spiritual or supernatural biblical text, whatever you want to poem, whatever you want to refer to them as, like the gods back in the day were very actively involved in the day-to-day lives of humanity.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas now they're not so much. Maybe at some point in time they decide, or she decided to adopt a sort of TNG kind of next generation crime directive until we become so advanced that at the very least, that we're in peace with each other. Maybe they won't interact with us.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Or maybe the gods realized that we had no need of them anymore, so they left to go find someone that did need them.
Yeah. So in Christian theology, this actually refers to a very specific idea. This is called dispensationalism. And what dispensationalism says is, look, there was this time where God and angels and demons were all interacting with the world and all doing this stuff. But sometime after the death of Jesus, maybe after the Pentecost and shortly after the stint with the apostles, that kind of just stopped, right? And there's folks who say, dispensationalism kind of describes that, God literally just doesn't interact with the world in the same way because maybe he doesn't need to. Maybe Jesus and his message is enough to kind of cover for things. I say maybe it's also because the better that we got an understanding of this thing called science, and the better that we had ways of tracking the world, suddenly using God as an explanation for anything maybe kind of started making less and less sense. I mean, the thing is, right, you mentioned, well, it seems like there's cultures all around the world who talked about God working in person, and then that kind of stops later. But there's still cultures today that say that there are gods working in people's lives, right? Like that actually hasn't really stopped. It's just the way in which we describe God has worked in people's lives. If you look at the Old Testament, God literally wrestles with a guy named Jacob. That's not a metaphor. He literally does WWE with Jacob and breaks his elbow or something. What does he break? He breaks his leg or his thigh. Thank you. Breaks his thigh. Okay, that's kind of awesome. But also, not a view of God that you would hear a pastor say today. A pastor today is going to say, "Yeah, God help me find my keys." It's not going to be like, "Oh, I just wrestled with God last Tuesday, and we broadcasted that on pay-per-view, and it was awesome." I think our understanding of how God even works in our lives changes because we kind of have to reconcile what we know about the world, right? I understand maybe it could be a violation of a prime directive, but maybe also we just found better ways to look at stuff and found, oh, these God explanations maybe aren't the best for explaining things, right? I don't know. There's different ways to look at this.
So now I'd like to ask the both of you, Godless Granny and Dan. I've heard this discussed and tackled a couple of different ways on the different shows put on by the ACA.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it's God's responsibility to interact with us and reveal himself to humanity because of all the genocide and all the everything that he's kind of taken credit for? Or do you think it's our responsibility to plead and implore him to reveal himself to us and kind of get our shit together so he can? I mean, like, or at least do you think he'll have any kind of good explanation to give to us on
I think that depends. I think that depends entirely on God's goals.
Mm-hmm.
If God's intent is that people believe in him, if that truly is a goal of God's, then it's his responsibility to reveal himself in such a way that that's possible. And if God doesn't care what people believe about him, then no, he bears no such responsibility.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And it seems like most of the Christian tradition does say that God is interested in having a relationship with humans. I mean, he sent his son to die on the cross for us, right? Like that's this narrative that's told because, oh, he loves us actually. Like he really wants to be with us and he gives us that choice. And for some reason, there wasn't any problem when Jesus was on earth and doing miracles and talking to people and demonstrating God's power. But for some reason, that's a problem today in 2023, which I think is kind of interesting. Because I don't know, we can't get angels or something. I mean, like, I'm not saying it has to be an everyday thing, but at least like a press conference or something, right? Just to like clear up the air. Because as far as I know, it's been a while since the big man upstairs has been down here on earth, if he was ever here at all. But yeah, I 100% agree. If he is interested in a relationship with us, there's definitely better ways to do it. And if he's going to send us to hell too, if we don't, then yeah, that seems like you want to put your best foot forward there, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Well, thanks for chatting with me, guys. It was fun. I hope to see you again.
You asked a couple really great questions. So
thank you for calling.
I enjoyed that a lot. Thanks again for calling in, Natica. Hope we helped you out on your journey wherever you're at. That was pretty pleasant. What'd you think of that call?
Oh, I thought he was very pleasant to talk to.
Yeah. Like I said, wherever you're at on your journey, if you just want to hear our perspectives, that's it. That's all I can tell you. I'm not going to say, hey, you got to believe exactly the way I think about things. But I'm actually really happy when people ask us how we got to where we are, because that gives us a chance to really fully explain sort of the reasoning there, and see if they can agree with that or disagree. So very, very cool. Before we move on to the next call, I do have some announcements I got to make as per usual. First of all, I already mentioned how one of the ways you can support us is through Patreon, but there's another way you can support us. It's through Super Chats. If you donate on YouTube right now, we will read them live on the air. So feel free to make us read the stuff that you've written, assuming, of course, that they're YouTube appropriate. And I think it's a fun thing to do. We honestly, I like it when people do the Super Chats. We honestly don't get enough. I love it when people send stuff for us to read, especially if it's funny stuff, because I don't know, I think it's funny. So yeah, Super Chats are a great way to support us. Another way to support us is by becoming a member. If you do that, you can get emojis in the YouTube chat, your name gets highlighted, and you'll be immune to the slow mode. And you can do that for as little as 99 cents a month, which is not bad, in my opinion. So that is another way you can support the show. And of course, thank you to everybody that already does that on the channel. You guys rock. And one more thing, I'm going to go ahead and get this out of the way. We do have limited edition t-shirts that are on sale right now, as we always do every single month. This month's shirt is, I'm not saying it was aliens, but it was aliens with a cool little custom alien there. And of course, we have all the regular Truth Wanted merch. So if you want to rock some Truth Wanted swag this summer, if you want to get your guns out, okay, and show off in this hot August heat, get yourself a Truth Wanted like tank top or something, right? I would want to see that. So go ahead and check that out if you're interested. But for now, I think it's time we keep the conversations rolling. What do you say, Godless Granny?
Sounds good to me.
Okay. All right, folks. We do have open lines right now. And I have one person who is in line to talk to us. It is Emmanuel, the unworthy servant. They are calling in now. Unworthy servant from Texas. You are live on Truth Wanted. What's up?
How you guys doing? Hi, Dan. We have spoke like 100 times before. Godless Granny, we spoke before. So there was like a particular, you said like last week I called when you were on with Prophet Zad, and you were saying that I did like no true Scotsman fallacy when I said that you don't find Republicans or Democrats being Christians. But I would like to ask you that how many Calvinists are in the GOP or Congress or positions of power? I just want to like show you what my point was.
I don't like how many Calvinists. I don't know. I don't know.
I don't know either.
Yeah.
They don't usually give us the breakdown within Protestants as to which branch
I'll tell you this.
Protestantism each
There's
are.
certainly more Calvinists than there are atheists.
Oh yeah.
In government, I have no doubts about that.
There is no Calvinist Republican in the Senate, by the way, just so you know. Okay. How many Democrats? Okay. How many Democrats speak in tongues? Publicly.
There's definitely people who vote Democrat that are evangelical, that are part of a tradition of a church that speaks in tongues. Absolutely.
Yeah, there are two who actually hold power. I can give you their names. What my point was like most people positions of power that we see that we consider Christians. They use those labels to actually gain power from the majority. That was my point. I was not making like no true Scotsman fallacy. I'm actually, I'm just I just became a little bit aggressive because when I saw the comments. Let me get to my today's point. So I don't think that most arguments that are made by theists like me or any other, or like John from Canada or whatever, I don't think it's because of our arguments that are not working. It's just that even if we show you piles and piles of evidence, you probably cannot believe in God. And what my conclusion is, a natural person does not accept the things of the Spirit of God, for they are foolishness to him, and he cannot understand them because they are spiritually discerned. 1 Corinthians 2:14. So unless Christ touches your heart and you become born again, you can't believe in God and become born again. That's why I see a lot of ex-evangelicals.
So you believe in predestination?
Yeah, you have to be elected before you could actually go through the process of salvation. Most people get it the other way, where you have to believe in Christ, then you become born again. But the truth is, after you're born again, God will give you the spirit of faith. Then you could, inherit eternal life. Well,
so who's going to get that spirit and who isn't was already determined by God even before anyone was born, correct?
Yeah. God chooses certain people.
God made people predestined to hell.
Well, I don't really focus on those things. By the way, whether or not someone goes to heaven or hell, I really don't care that much about it. The thing is,
I care. I mean, I like how you choose. Oh, well, we don't talk about the millions of people that'll be burning for eternity. Like, oh, that's we kind of put that in the corner over here. Like, that's kind of what we want to focus on, because what you're essentially saying is, unless God directly intervenes on my behalf, I'm screwed. Like, I literally can't do anything, right?
Well, doesn't that make more sense? Because
No,
I
it
would like to
doesn't.
play. Okay,
That's exactly what caused me to lose my faith.
okay. Like if you read the New Testament, and in the New Testament, by the way, I have studied the New Testament like for years and years. And when I read the New Testament, I used to be Armenian, by the way. I mean, I used to be a Mennonite. So what made me now, I identify myself as a progressive Pentecostal Calvinist, because the thing that shook my world is I used to always think that, you know, John 3:16, God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten son. But when I got through the Gospel of John, at a certain chapter, it says that a true shepherd will give his life to the sheep, which is indication that his sacrifice doesn't work for the goats. So, and when I later in other epistles, when I start reading and studying more and more, deep studying, I found out that, you know, like the comparison between Christ giving his life to the church. So the rest, you're not predestined by God. So if you're not predestined by God, how are you going to be? How are you going to acquire the knowledge of God? So
Yeah. So here's the difference between
I changed
you and
my
me,
worldview,
Emmanuel.
and I went through deconstruction of my Armenian views and Mennonite views. So I become
here's the
more
difference.
Pentecostal.
Yeah, you are an Armenian Christian, and you looked at the Bible and you said, wow, this theology doesn't make sense based on what I'm reading, and you found a theology that maybe better encompasses what you're reading, right? And so
Yeah,
on some level,
okay, I said I was a Mennonite, which is Armenian. I did not say that I'm Armenian, by the way. There's a country called
well, yes, Armenian Christian. That's what I specified. I yeah, absolutely, right. Because that's particular, you know, theological doctrines assigned to that sort of particular Christian subset. But right, you saw the Bible and you looked at it and you said, this doesn't make sense. This theology makes more sense. Okay. When I looked at the Bible and I said, none of these theologies make sense, because I can find just as many problems with Calvinism as I can with Armenian Christian theology, as I can with, I mean, any theology under the sun, honestly. Anything that can be brought to me, I think they're all problematic. I think all of the verses put together, when you look at what it says and what the writer's intent were and what they wanted people to think about God and Jesus and his relationship with humanity, I think it all doesn't make sense combined together. Because I think the best explanation for what we're reading isn't that Calvinism is true, is that these books were written by different people at different times with different ideas of what God was and who Jesus was. And that's why we see this disconnect. And that's why it kind of doesn't make sense if we're trying to fit puzzle pieces to like 10 different puzzles together and we can't get a clear image. That's really my take when I look at this stuff. When you look at it and you see, oh wow, I have this revelation now, I think, you know, Calvinism actually is the most sense. I say that still doesn't solve my problems with Christianity in the Christian narrative. I think there's too many holes to plug, and this ship has already sunk in my mind. I've gotten off, you know, that's it. So I don't know. That's really all I can think to say to this, Emmanuel. But Godless Granny, what do you think?
Well, first, unworthy servant, I have a question for you. You recognize that even the Bible says that most people will be unbelievers, correct?
Yes,
For
because
many are
even
called, but
if you
few are
see,
chosen. The way is
even
narrow,
if
and
you,
those who find it are few.
yes, because even when you see the denominations, the people that identify as Pentecostals is very low. Most
Okay.
are Baptist
So,
or
so if
Lutherans, wrong denominations are money.
okay,
Most
so
people
if
don't identify as being Pentecostal.
if the ones that God has chosen for himself, the ones that God chooses to save, is just a very small minority of humanity, that would mean that the vast majority of humanity was predestined not to salvation, correct?
Absolutely, because most
Okay.
people don't believe.
And the Bible also says that it is better for a person not to be born than to go to hell, correct?
No, the verse that you're quoting is saying that it is better for him not to be born, which was talking about Judas, right?
Actually, there's a few of them that say that. There
Yeah,
is one
yeah,
specifically that is pointed at Judas, but there are a
yeah.
couple more that do make that same point, which I would
Yeah.
ask then, if it is better for a person not to be born than to go to hell, then why does God make people that he predestines to hell? What possible reason is there for that?
The reason is Romans chapter 9. It talks about how the potter is making a clay. He's making the specific clay for dishonor, a specific clay for honor, but he gets glory from both. So even when people are going to hell or heaven,
Doesn't
still
that sound like an
glorifies
awfully
God.
selfish God to you? That, I'm going to make people and I'm going to make them suffer just so that I can get glory from that? Is God that needy that he needs that?
Oh, what about the people that just go to heaven and who got their sins washed away? I focus on more on people who are going to heaven and
Well,
meeting the
that's
Lord.
fine for that
Heaven.
very small little tiny
Because
in-group that you got there. But for the vast majority of us, that doesn't do anything for us. Let me ask you this question. Do you have children?
unfortunately, I don't have children because I'm
You
not
don't
in a
have children. Okay.
relationship.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. You do realize that if you were to have children, the chances are that God would choose not to save your children. Would you be okay with bringing a child into the world knowing that most likely God's going to send that child to hell forever?
Actually, this is funny because I debated on a couple of atheist channels, and
Mm-hmm.
it's like a very common question. Well, what I think is they could be in heaven or hell. I really, as I've said before, I really don't care who goes to heaven or hell. That's not really a thing that I'm concerned about.
Do you care if you go to heaven or hell?
No, because I already believe that I'm guaranteed to have salvation.
Okay,
Well,
wait.
maybe-
What you do? Wait, no, that doesn't answer the question. You do care. It sounds like. Because your answer is, I know I'm saved. So you do care. Like, it does matter if you go to heaven or hell, right? Like, you would rather go to heaven than hell, right?
It's not because of my free will and my choice that I'm going to heaven if I
understand.
care with it.
I understand. But if you had the choice, let's say you live in a world where you do have the choice, and God said, here, Emmanuel, you have the choice, heaven or hell, what would you choose?
Heaven or hell? Well, if you give me the choice, I don't think I'll pick either of those. To be honest.
Oh, really?
Because because here's the thing.
Welcome to atheism.
Yeah, I was going to say that's not the answer I was expecting. I'll be honest, but I am listening.
Okay, so what I think is, if I focus more on people who are going to hell, I just want to join you, Dan, and I want to go to hell. That doesn't make any sense. I want to focus more on the side who are going to heaven, who are serving the Lord. If I focus more on that scenario, I'll go to heaven. But if I focus on, what happens to the people who have lived a good life, that they were predestined not to go to heaven, and I just go to hell with them, that doesn't make any sense. If I can't even save anyone else, at least like you have to give me a space where I can only focus on the positive side.
Okay, so it still sounds like you want to go to heaven, though.
No, it's better to go to heaven than hell. Absolutely. You know that.
That's what I wanted to know.
non-existence is not a scary thing. That's what I'm trying to point out here.
Okay, sure.
You assume that all theists think that non-existence is a scary thing, but it's not a scary thing.
Well, I never
Oh,
said
I
that,
agree.
but yeah, I mean, look, what I was trying to get to is it is preferable if it's a binary, right? If it's between two choices, I think most Christians are going to say they want to go to heaven, right? It seems like the more pleasant option. Like, so you like there's a knowledge there that you know that you're saved. Somehow you know. I don't know how you know, but apparently you know that you're saved and you find peace in that. What if I said to you, I actually know, or let's say not even me, let's say God talks to you and says, you're actually going to go to hell. Hi, I'm God. Nice to meet you. I'm here telling you you're going to hell. Would you be at peace with that, or would you think maybe that's a bit unfair? Like, you don't think there's any problem with that? Because I mean, what would you think?
That will actually be funny because you're saying that, like, you know, I've lived my life, I've served God, and, you know, I believe that
I
He
did.
has regenerated me and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
so
served God for 42 years.
Yeah. And there's
that
people that
doesn't
serve
matter.
God that will go to hell,
My point,
right?
yeah, my point is what I'm trying to say is if God told me that you will not inherit eternal life, like, those are not the things that I zoom in, because it's not because I love to go to heaven that I'm going to inherit eternal life in the first place. This all is a set up thing where I'm just doing the will of the Father, like, to go to heaven or hell. That's
I understand.
what I'm.
I understand that you
Yeah.
don't believe that you have the choice. We get that. But I think it's dishonest to say, well, it really doesn't matter to me, because it does matter to you. I think you've
No,
already said
what
it
I'm
is more preferable to go to heaven than to hell. So rather than evading the question, I really want to know, after everything that you've done, you've served the Lord for a large portion of your life. I don't know how long, I don't know you, but you've told me that you've served the Lord for parts of your life. And God tomorrow comes down and says, Emmanuel, you're going to hell. Would you think that's fair? Would you be okay with that?
Yeah, because I think that's fair, because first of all, I believe that we all deserve to go to hell. It's because of the mercy of God that is revealed in my life that I'm inheriting eternal life. Just like you're just pointing out, I'm not a good person. I'm a sinner worthy of death. I have committed a lot of
Why
sins
does
in
God
my
make
life.
such awful garbage? Why does
Well-
God make humanity if they're just such awful, terrible things?
Well, I think it's in Romans 3:22 and 23. It says that there's no distinction between Jews and Gentiles, for all have sinned and fall short the glory of God, right? It is
That
because
doesn't
of
answer
the
the question.
righteousness of... Okay, I'm sorry.
Well, but it sounds like, but here's the thing.
Yeah.
Let's take a step back, right? Because you're saying that it's actually totally fine because his judgment is whatever, right? It's his call. It's not our call to make. Okay, I understand that. So if he can just say tomorrow that you can go to hell, and if he could just say tomorrow that I get to go to heaven, what's the point? Right? Like, it sounds like we can't even do anything about it. So why even care? Unless he's going to be talking to me and having like a real personal relationship with me, which he obviously doesn't at this point in my life. Why even do anything at all?
The reason is you have to live up to the election and predestination of God. Philippians 2, just like you have to do yours, you have to work out your salvation that is given by God with fear and trembling, right? So what you have to do is, after God gives you this gift, this free grace, you still have to be obedient to the word, because that's your real nature in Christ, right? We are here to please God, right?
But why?
And
why do we have to do that?
I'm telling you, because if you are reborn by God, that's your nature. We had Adam's nature before we were created by Christ. I inherited immorality from my father, right? From my mother, father.
But you still have that nature, right?
Life. I
Like you still have
that
it.
nature. That's why
Right.
I have to fight with the flesh, right?
Okay. So yeah, why though? Why do you have to fight with the flesh? Because it sounds like you're in the same situation that you were born with.
I'm in the same situation, but this new nature that I have received from Christ, now I have a double nature, which my spirit wants to do righteousness, but my flesh fights it. So now I'm in a condition where I want to do the will of God. On the other hand, I want to live for the flesh. That's why I have to study the scriptures and pray to God daily so that I will become more and more Christ-like. That's just like my passion. You can fight with my nature.
Yeah, I guess I can't. I don't know. I mean, I've had several conversations with you on this show, and I just think that's very interesting. I understand, right? There is a narrative that's told within Christianity that, look, when you're born again, you have the Holy Spirit within you, and you have a desire to do that of what the Holy Spirit wills. I just think that will is really inconsistent, and nobody can really tell me what that means, because I hear from you that actually he wants X, Y, and Z, and I hear from every other Christian that's ever called into the show, actually he wants A, B, and C. So I don't know. I don't know. It's hard for me to even understand even why you'd want to do it in the first place, because it sounds like he could just say, oh, actually, forget everything. You know,
like,
you're going downstairs, and there's nothing you can do about it. And that to me seems pretty unjust. Doesn't seem like a fair world. Doesn't seem like a fair God. Doesn't seem like a just God. I don't even know what justice would mean if that was true.
certainly doesn't sound like a loving God. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, a God that makes beings for the purpose of torturing them for eternity. That does not sound like a loving person to me.
Yeah.
Maybe
I don't know what love is.
Okay, I think you're focusing on the wrong thing. Like, my suggestion is, don't focus on who's going to hell, what is justice, all of this stuff. If you really focus on what's done on the cross and what Christ has done, I think you'll be better off with Christianity. Why do you have to focus on? Oh, his.
Why do we have to
one
focus
thing you
on
just you told me at the outset of this call that I can't do any otherwise. So why are you asking me why I'm doing a certain thing if you started out by telling me that's the only thing I can do?
But buddy, you already told me that you used to be a bond servant as well. That's what.
Yes, I was.
That's what I'm talking to you, right? Okay.
Yeah.
I think this conversation is going nowhere, Dan. I'm really sorry.
Yeah,
but
I'm sorry
I hope
too.
that we'll have a. Okay. I hope that we'll have a better conversations and thank you for taking my calls. By the way, I appreciate godless granny.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay.
Godless granny.
And
you got it.
And objective Dan. Thank you so much.
Thank you for
You're
calling.
welcome. You're welcome, Emmanuel. Have a good one there. I agree, it's going nowhere, but I would probably disagree with the reasons why. Sorry, I'll finish my point here. I'll definitely want to hear what you have to say, but to just say, well, I think you're focusing on the wrong thing. Imagine if Jeffrey Dahmer came up to you and was like, listen, I know I killed all these people, including some of your friends and family, but I really think you're focusing on the wrong thing here, because, well, I provide a sense of like community with people around me. When people act towards my will, they can sometimes do good things, right? When I have a plan for everybody that I want. I mean, like, what that sounds ludicrous to me, right? That's like not something anybody would think is reasonable, but for some reason, when we have a God say, oh, well, don't focus on the hellfire and the torture and the eternal suffering of everyone that you know and love because they didn't believe in me, just focus on the, I don't know, strawberry milkshakes you get to drink in heaven. I mean, like, that's ludicrous. I will not I will talk about those things anyway.
The way he talks, he's thinking exactly the same way that I did before I had that reflection on the life of the Apostle Paul. Focusing only on those that are saved, only on the ones that God loves. And that's why I want him to focus on the other ones, because if you only focus on the good part, like you said, then you're only going to see the good. But when you consider that the bad, the awful, goes to the vast majority of humanity, how can you say, well, don't look at that part?
Yeah,
That makes no sense to me.
doesn't make sense to me either. But I think we've made our points pretty clear, and I think we should move on to some other
Sounds
folks
good
who
to me.
want to talk to us, who have been patiently waiting to talk to us. But before we do, really quick, just as a reminder, if you want to listen to the show in audio only form, go to tiny.cc/AEN podcasts for all the latest shows in audio form. And if you're going to be in the Austin area in like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, like 3 weeks from now, August 27th, we're going to be broadcasting live from the Free Thought Library. So you should watch Talk Heathen and Atheist Experience that day. Talk Heathen's going to have Forrest Valkai, J Mike, and Jamie the Blimey. It's going to be a 3-person show. And the Atheist Experience is going to have Johnny P. Angel, Forrest Valkai, and J Mike, another 3-person show. Doors are going to open at noon for that. So check it out real quick. Also, if you want to email the show and tell me what you like, what you didn't like, or just for whatever, you can email the show. It's truth@atheist-community.org to do that. You can also reach out at tv@atheist-community.org and see what's going on the website at atheist-community.org. Lastly, real quick, there is a Facebook group. It's run by fans for fans. You can check that out at tiny.cc/FBTWG to interact with all the other fans that talk about this show. And with that out of the way, it is time to talk to other people. Let's do it. You're ready for this, Godless Granny? We've got John from Canada who wants to talk to us. So a double theist call in a row here. John from Canada, you are live on Truth Wanted. What's going on?
Hi, Dan. Hi, Godless Granny.
Hello.
Hello.
Oh, yes. How are you?
Doing good.
I'm
John, how
fine.
about yourself? It's been a minute.
Yeah. Anyway, this question is for Godless Granny. Godless Granny, I'd like to know when, how did you lose your faith? I'd like to know.
Okay. I lost my faith about 4 years ago. And as I was just saying a minute ago, that it started when I started reflecting on the life of the Apostle Paul. And I didn't know it at the time, but what happened was I ended up with the divine hiddenness problem. What I did was I thought about the fact that God made a personal appearance to Paul. And when he did, he told Paul exactly what he needed to know in order to believe. And so I had to ask myself, does God want everyone to believe in him? And if the answer to that question is yes, then why doesn't God do the same thing for everybody? And if the answer is no, then what's the point in believing if God doesn't want you to believe? He doesn't care whether you believe or not. And if he does want you to believe, and he does know what you need to know in order to believe, why doesn't he give that to everyone if he's able to do that?
So you felt you didn't get it? What you were looking for?
Well, okay, I at that time did believe in God. I had that belief, but I also knew a lot of people who didn't. And I had prayed repeatedly for God to give me the words to tell people that would allow them to believe as well. You know, God, what does this person need to know so that they can believe? And no words would come to me. Or I would tell them what I knew from the Bible, but no one was speaking to me and giving me specific things to say that would help that particular person. But it shouldn't even be me. You know, if God really cares about what people believe, then why isn't God doing this himself? Why isn't he telling people what they need to know in order to believe?
At one point, you felt that it was your job to tell people about him, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so you feel like your role was pointless?
Okay, I was a believer for 42 years. And during that time, I did not feel my role was pointless, because at that time I thought that belief in God was the most important thing of all, because that was going to get you into heaven, and that this life was was just a dress rehearsal for that life. That life was for eternity. This one was temporal. And so I thought, yes, telling people about God was the most important thing that I could do.
What changed?
As I told you, I suddenly realized that it didn't make any sense. If God really does want people to know about him, then why isn't he telling people? Why isn't he making sure that everyone gets that information, not just a few people? Why isn't he making sure everyone gets exactly what they personally need, instead of sending me, who doesn't know what's in other people's brains, to try to guess what they need to know in order to be saved? Why doesn't God, who knows exactly what they're thinking and what's stopping them from knowing, tell them himself?
Is there anything that could bring you back?
It's possible, but extremely unlikely. And here's why. Because that took me from a Calvinist position to a Universalist position. And I still believed in God at that point. But from there, I also still believed in the inerrancy of the Bible. And it wasn't long after that that someone proved to me that the Bible does contain errors, specifically that the flood did not happen. Not it could not happen. It did not happen. And we can prove that it did not happen. And once I knew that the Bible was not inerrant as I had always been taught, then I could no longer believe. There was no foundation for my faith anymore.
If God Himself stood right in front of you, like right now, would you still believe, or would you acknowledge His existence and turn your back?
I would have to ask him who he is and what he's all about, because everything that I've been taught about God cannot possibly be true. So if there really is a God and he really wants me to know him, and he came before me and said, "Hello, here I am," my first question would be, who are you and what are you all about?
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time. Have a good night.
Okay, you too.
Thank you, John, for talking to us. And yeah, there it is, folks. John from Canada talking to us, just asking questions.
Yep.
Apparently.
Nothing wrong with that.
What'd you think of that call, Carlos Granny?
It was a nice softball.
Okay.
It was certainly easy.
The softball, huh? Yeah.
I
mean,
would have liked to have heard what John's opinion was. I wish he had told us what his position was. That would
well, let's just say John has definitely given his position on a lot of things on this show in the past. So
okay.
I'm personally not as interested anymore. But you know,
Okay.
I'm glad that conversation happened regardless, because those are all good questions to ask. In fairness of somebody who doesn't believe, what would you do if hypothetically a being who said they were God was in front of you? What's the next step, right? That's I think that's a thing that comes up a lot. Real quickly though, I neglected to mention something in my announcements when I went over them earlier. There is the back cruise. If you're wondering, man, why are there three hosts for two of our shows in the studio? That's kind of crazy. That's because that is going to be the weekend of our bat cruise. We are going to be down here in Austin on a riverboat, looking at all the bats coming out of Congress Avenue Bridge. And tickets are, as of right now, I think they're sold out. It says sold out on the thing here. So maybe, I don't know, if somebody isn't going to make it or something, maybe they'll post it on some of the Facebook groups or something that you can get tickets that way. I don't know. I don't even know if actually they're allowed to do that. I haven't checked up on the rules, but it is sold out. It is going to be happening in a few weeks here. Unfortunately, I am not going to be able to make it this year, which I am regretting more and more every day, because lots of people are going to be there. Pretty much everybody else that's hosting is going to be there, and I'm not going to make it. But I'm excited for everybody else that gets to go hang out with all the fun ACA folks. So with that, I think we have time for at least one more caller. So let's do that. We have Daniel, who's calling in from Canada. Daniel, you are live on Truth Wanted. What's up?
Yeah, hi Dan. Not much. Just wanted to call in. I heard your show last week, and you were talking about those UFO hearings and stuff, and I wanted to call in then.
Yeah, the UFO hearings, a lot of stuff was happening last week in UFO news. And I'm surprised I haven't been mobbed by the UFO people already on my takes. But what specifically about the UFO stuff did you want to talk about?
Well, I called you before. I talked about the insectoids on Mars and my belief that the government, it's true that there's an alien reality behind the UFO phenomena.
Oh, yes, I recognize you now. Oh, my goodness. Yeah. It's been so long. Daniel, how are you doing, my friend? Yes, aliens on Mars. Yeah, man, we had a whole arc on this show. Oh, man, that you're taking me back here. Man, you've been watching this whole time and haven't been calling in? That's crazy.
Well, I usually watch afterwards. I'm always watching. I'm not watching live. I'm watching afterwards. But tonight I'm watching.
Okay. Well, to catch up those
UFO.
Yeah, well, I want to catch up callers. Daniel, you called in a number of times before with the claim that there are insectoid beings on Mars and that NASA not only knows about this, but it has been covering up this phenomenon. So you must have some interesting takes about the alien hearings last week, I imagine.
Well, that rumor has been for the last 30 years that the government has, it goes back to Roswell, that they've had bodies and a craft. And I don't know. I think the guy's telling the truth, but I don't know. He didn't really have any evidence, right? He just.
Yes.
But again,
I agree with you.
I think that.
Go ahead.
But again, I still think there is a UFO. There is an alien reality. They have to keep it secret. And lately, I've been thinking about the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey. And have you seen that movie?
I have seen that movie.
Remember the end of the Dawn of Man sequence when the ape man, after winning the battle for the water hole, after he kills his opponents with the bone, he throws the bone in the air. And then then you do a quick cut to the future, to the modern time, and we see an orbiting nuclear weapons satellite going down. That comes down at the exact moment, right, to show the transition to modern man, right?
Yeah, something like that. I remember there was a monolith and a giant baby and a bunch of stuff happening there. But I think those scenes vaguely familiar.
The monolith appeared earlier, and that's what to me, it was an alien tool, some alien technology that gave the ape man, the ape guy, the idea to use a bone as a weapon to kill for food and then to kill for the water hole. But the thing is, I think the point of that is why we can't be told the truth about the alien reality is because we're still essentially a bunch of savage apes.
Yeah. Well, okay. So
are the insectoids on Mars more intelligent than we are?
No. The girls, Jenny, the insectoids on Mars is something that has been observed. It's more than that. They're just what I think on Mars. I think Mars shows evidence of a destroyed civilization, and I think that used to inhabit. I think there were humanoids and these insectoids live together on the same planet. But I think something happened to the planet's, orbit trajectory or something, and the environment, the climate changed, and it's become a much rougher climate. And I think the insectoids survived, but I think the humanoids did not survive. And I think maybe they got themselves to Earth because there seems to be in the what people have been seeing on Mars in the rover footage when they take away NASA's the blurring that NASA does routinely on everything. You see that there are structures on Mars, and there seems to be destroyed structures. And I think there are structures on the moon and structures on planets and moons throughout our solar system.
You dropped some new lore this time because I don't think I heard you say before that you think that the insectoids are here on Earth. But you do think that?
No, I don't think. No. The insectoids are clearly on Mars. They're just like they look like a primitive type being. They just use tools like I said, you can see them in that picture. I sent you that
Yeah.
Roger in Kansas City a video. Roger found it. It wasn't me who found it.
This is a while back. We're going back to some truth wanted lore here. Let me try to just steer the conversation here a little bit, Danny, if you don't mind. But I want to point out something that I agree with you on. Surprisingly enough, is that and other people in the skeptic community, I think, don't realize this or have other thoughts. I actually completely 100% agree with the idea that if the American government had evidence of alien life, they would keep that shit to themselves, especially if it's like has the ability to like contact us and like do stuff with us. I think that is a national defense emergency at that point. I think that they would want to keep that locked up because they don't want the aliens to get access to our nukes or whatever. Like they there's a lot of secrets that come into that. And plus how we might know of that may reveal other information that other countries don't know about. Like, oh yeah, we figured this out because we have this satellite that's been monitoring China this whole time or something, right? Like, there's probably national defense interests at play. Here's where I disagree, though. I just don't think that the evidence supports that we have found any life that we know of that's available to the public. Now, David Grush is like, oh yeah, man, we got all this evidence here with, we were taking bodies and stuff, and we know about this as Roswell. Okay, David Grush can say that all day long, but as you and I think both come to the same conclusion, he didn't present that last week, so he has yet to really demonstrate any of that. He's just saying stuff at this point, right? If we were to come to the conclusion that there are aliens out there and they are doing stuff, it has to be made of stronger stuff than I think what I've seen so far. And unfortunately, that does include the blurry Mars pictures that we talked about earlier, but that is my take on the situation. What do you think?
Yeah, but I think it's more than that they can't tell us, because it's like the prime directive in Star Trek. You can't when you mess around, when you have a superior technology, when you have advanced technology, and you start sharing it with primitive societies. Like I said, what if they had technology that could give us some, like, it could power our home, and it was the size of a bread box or something. But at the same time, if you had a little mechanical skills, you could turn it into an atomic bomb or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah,
we can't be trusted with this, with the technology. We're a bunch of scientists.
I actually wrote a story very along these lines in the 1970s, with climate change as being the factor that caused life to shift from planet to planet. Although I had climate change backwards, I had the planets cooling rather than getting hotter, and discovery of life on Mars and eventual colonization of Venus as Earth became too cool to sustain life anymore. But I then decided that the whole idea was stupid, and I threw it away.
Well, I mean, you see, there is this idea of the cosmic zoo, right? It's the zoo hypothesis. It is this idea of, look, other aliens know that we exist, and it's like, well, they don't want to touch us because we're just like animals at the zoo. You're not going to mess with a lion at a zoo and go in its enclosure because you might get screwed over, right? Doesn't matter that you're smarter than the lion, is that the lion will still mess you up because it's a lion, and that's what lions do, right? So that there's kind of this idea that humans will just fuck up anything that we see, right? And we'll just, as soon as we see a gray, we're like, Mr. President, press the button. We're launching that nuke into space, and we're killing those aliens to liberate them for America and steal their oil. Like, that's what they would be like. So yeah, I think there is something to that effect that could be the reason why. But again, that also conflicts with like David Grush's idea that we've actually been just hanging out with aliens or just like in contact with them and stuff, because that seems to go against it. So I don't know if that means, it's the bug people out there that are doing stuff, or there are just some forces out there that are interdimensional and don't want to mess with us. Who knows? But I just can't think that anything we've seen so far can demonstrate that we know for sure about any of that, including the bug people thing. Sorry, Daniel, but that is my take.
Yeah, but I mean, the bug people, all I'm saying, those are just something I've seen on Mars. They just seem to be part of what I think exists on Mars. But I think there's a bigger picture here, that I think what what happened in the year 2000? Like, I've been following ufology since about the 1980s when I first saw Whitley Strieber on Johnny Carson. That's what got me into it. And every decade, there's always been something like the abduction phenomenon changed, where it stopped being just simple abductions. The abductees started to realize that they've been abducted their whole life, like they're being a tracked animal, like the way we track animals and we monitor them throughout their whole life. And then in the 2000s, these anomaly channels started coming up on YouTube, where people were looking at NASA pictures, NASA and JPL and all the countries like whatever, Britain, India, China, Russia, all these satellite pictures from the planets. And what they're noticing is that the ground, the surface is always blurry. And if they de-blur that surface, like I said, if they use Photoshop to see what's under the blurring, there seems to be structures on all sorts of planets and moons throughout our solar system. And what I think it's a sign of is that civilizations come to a point where either you advance and you keep getting technology advanced, and you get to a point where you're so amazingly advanced that your star, your sun, when it's time to explode, you're able to leave your planet because your technology is so advanced that you can go and inhabit any planet, any moon, and just live inside it. And that's what I think is happening in our planets. And I think they came to our solar system, and I think they found Earth, and I think they turned out into a little like zoo, or they started our life, and they've been monitoring us for eons. I think they're part of our. I think that's another thing why they keep it secret, because they're part of our beginnings and what.
I get you. I get you.
Yeah.
I think that's, if that's true, that's cool. You know what I mean? Like, big if true, right? That's how I feel about it. Okay, sure. But people on Mars, and they've been watching us this whole time. I hope you're right. Low key, that would make, maybe that would explain some things. But like, I don't know. It has to be more than just allegedly de-blurring pictures from NASA and other space agencies on the surface of Mars to convince me of that. I mean, the stuff I've seen so far, again, it's just, I don't know if that's the route, right? Maybe if we got like, I don't know, a testimony from the bug people. A little video, maybe if they sound like a golden record, like Sagan did in the 70s, or and
a YouTube channel.
Yeah, our YouTube channel, that'd be cool.
Well, like I said, the bug people, they seem to be just primitive beings. They seem to be like a civilization that they just look like primitive beings who live underground on Mars. And what we're catching is them come up to the surface, and they seem to want something from the surface. They seem to have tools that goes into the surface. And I think it's water or something. I've heard that there's water in Martian soil or whatever. And I realize the environment is pretty harsh, because someone called. I remember when I talked about this with you, someone called after me and said, and shitted all over me and said, "Oh, M6 couldn't possibly survive on Mars because it's so cold." And I'm thinking, I don't know. I don't know their physiology. And just look at our deepest oceans. Go to the deepest part of our ocean. You'll find life down there. Like, life can exist, I think, anywhere practically. If you got, I guess, but
it's also contingent on like an atmosphere and stuff, which I know Mars does have a very thin atmosphere, but like it doesn't. It's not made of the same materials, right? So, but if you inhabit like a moon or a planet and you live inside it, you make your own atmosphere. Maybe.
You know what I mean? You live inside it. You live underground.
That's like a Jules Verne Journey to the Center of the Earth kind of scenario, right? I don't know.
Yeah, but on planets and moons. Planets and moons.
If he's right, that totally destroys intelligent design.
That's true. Listen, Danny, I'm unfortunately we're kind of at the end of the show here, so I do have to let you go. But I'll say two things. One, I'm so glad you called back. It's been a minute since I talked to you about it. And two, you've been the nicest bug person believing call or person that I've ever had the chance of ever talking to about any of this stuff. And you know what? There's something about that just really makes me glad I do this show every week, Daniel, because you know what? I have completely different convictions than you do about this particular topic. But I'm really glad we can have a call and talk about it, and for you to continue to come back, even though people are nasty online and say mean things. Personally, I enjoy it for what it is. So
I don't care. I'm just here to tell the truth, Dan. I just think this is the truth. And
I hear you.
That's what we're here for. Truth wanted.
That's right, baby. Truth wanted.
It was nice talking to both of you.
You
Nice
too.
talking to
Thank
you
for
too,
calling.
Daniel. You have a great rest of your day. Yes, baby. Bug people are on Mars. We're back. We're back on this. We're back on this debate. And I want it. I know that's not what he wanted to call about. To be fair, he wanted to talk about some other stuff. But like come on. That's like the claim to fame right there. You can't leave that behind. I'm sorry, Daniel. That is your legacy with Truth Wanted. Is you're the guy that calls in that talks about bug people on Mars. That's it. I don't know what to say. Godless Grady, any thoughts on that call?
It actually is a topic that I'm not that into, and partly because when I was a believer, I was told that alien life was impossible only because if it existed, Jesus would have to go and die on every planet for every kind of species of life.
Maybe he did.
Yeah, maybe he did. Well, no, we can't because the Bible says it was appointed once for Jesus to die, and he only died once. So
we talked about this last week when Zod was on about the Christian point of view that aliens can't exist because of the Bible, which
exactly.
is a very interesting point of view, to put it mildly.
I've since met a number of Christians that completely reject that and believe that alien life is entirely possible and the Bible is true as well.
Yeah, I think I would like it if the Bible was true. I think it would be a more interesting sort of Marvel Cinematic Universe thing going on where there is like a Jesus on every race. It's like Green Lantern. Well, that's DC, but it's like Green Lantern. There's one Jesus on every planet who is part of the collective of Jesuses, which I guess that's low key kind of what Mormonism is about. But like that's probably not fair or accurate, but is fun to think about. Anyway, we're getting towards the tail end of the show, but folks, we are doing an after show today. Okay, so if you're watching this live, come join us in the Atheist Community Discord channel. It's a fan-made Discord. We're going to be on there. We're going to be talking to you guys for just a little bit longer. And check it out if you want to keep the conversation going. But before we get going here, I have to thank the awesome Godless Grady for being on with us. Godless Grady, thank you so much for your time today. You were awesome to be on.
Thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed it immensely. I'm
so glad. If people want to find more of your content, where should they go to?
They should go to Godless Granny on YouTube or Godless Granny on Twitter. I usually will answer faster on Twitter than anything else.
Yes. Okay. Sounds good. YouTube and Twitter. Again, I'm not calling it X. All right. None of that. It's still Twitter to me. It always will be, unless it's not Twitter anymore. Who knows if the platform will even be here for a year?
Especially since I made an alt account where I am Simon. I'm a parakeet, and the only thing it says in my bio is I tweet.
Yeah. So there's so many. Oh man, just look. I'm not. Everybody's already talked about this. It's a dumb idea. Okay, there's no reason to keep pressing that point. But hey, folks, we want to remind you as well that there is a We Want the Truth segment that I should shout out here. It's we know crystals can't heal, but their little known actual power is blank. That is the prompt for this week. So give your comments below before you go so that we can read the best answers for next week. And last but never least, I have to thank the wonderful, awesome, amazing, stupendous crew that help make this show happen every single week. And there's the crew rocking it in the back, making this thing happen. Thank you so much, crew. Thank you to all the folks on the chat and the moderators and everybody that helps out with the show. It is so cool that you're here. And thank you, the viewer, for tuning in and watching this week's episode of Truth Wanted. That's about all the time that we got for today. Before we go, Godless Granny, any words of wisdom for us? Words of wisdom.
Just my tagline. You know, when I was a believer, I thought that this life was a dress rehearsal for the next one, and so it was focused on a denial of self. And so my tagline is that is not true, and so you should just live your life.
Just live your life. I like it. Folks, I'm Objectively Dan. Remember to always keep wanting the truth, and I'll see you next time.
Watch the non-prophets and join the hosts in the live chat. Visit tiny.cc/ytnp.